Well, thanks everybody. Welcome to tonight's creative structure deal. And the deal that I have tonight to talk about is in Boulder. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is how we located the deal. And if you want to talk about like an oh my gosh type moment, I couldn't stress more than social media and how you can get opportunities off of social media. And it can be Facebook, it can be LinkedIn, it can be Twitter, it can be any type of social media. So how we got this was, it was through a Facebook contact. It happened to be someone that my wife Laura knew, and the individual called her up and said, I have a friend whose dad is in a situation, we don't know if you guys would really be interested in it or not, and he's kind of really in a desperate situation. And do you think that's something that you guys would be interested in going and talking to the individual? So it's obviously important in creating those relationships with, like everyone here. You never know who you're going to have and talk with. Even just within those folks that are not investors, that are just out there in the social media area. So this is a very, very incredible deal. So a little bit about the property. So it's located in Boulder. It was built in 1978. It's a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath with an attached oversized 2-car garage. It's 2,430 square feet. It is 2-story and it has a 1,232 square foot unfinished basement. The zoning is rural residence. The lot size is what's pretty incredible because it was one of the bigger lots in this one subdivision there, which is 20,372 square foot lot. So it's a fairly good sized lot. So obviously we had a distressed owner. He was in foreclosure, he had been in foreclosure, and he elected to go ahead and turn it into a bankruptcy 13. So he got with his attorney, turned it into a bankruptcy 13, and then he had over $120,000 in unsecured debt. So through his Chapter 13 trustee, he's out trying to make his payments on his unsecured debt, and he's negotiated now with his bank to continue to make his mortgage payments. Well, that was all well and good, but he was out of a job for 2 years. When he finally got a hold of me, he had been out, he had talked to every family member, he had borrowed money from his family just to try to hold on, try to get a job. Then he started borrowing money from friends, and it was at the point that when I met him, he wasn't making those payments on his mortgage. He hadn't been making his payments to the Chapter 13 trustee for his unsecured debt. He had actually over 6 months of HOA fees because he couldn't pay the HOA association either. So that was sitting there mounting up. He had utility bills, which he was ready to get his shut-off notices. In fact, he had a water shut-off notice on top of that. Behind in the mortgage payments, and he was at the point where if he hadn't started to make payments, basically his BK13 would be dismissed, which means he falls back into foreclosure, goes to foreclosure, and he would get zero. Absolutely zero. So here was the financial opportunity that we were looking at. Now in that area there's homes that have sold for $820,000, $875,000. Conservatively, I got my broker involved. We went out and we did comps and we said this home fixed up in the area of Boulder where it's at would be worth about $750,000. Here's the kicker, guys. His balance on his first mortgage was $290,000. And yet here he was on the verge of literally losing it all because he couldn't make the payments. Okay? So obviously the possible equity before liens, judgments, because he had liens sitting out there, he had judgments on top of all this. He had a family member who went out and filed judgment against him. Because this is how, it's getting pretty bad. The guy was a single parent. He had been a single parent for like 20 years. He had 4 kids. They'd pretty much all grown up and moved out. so he only had one loan on the house. He was a hoarder. Absolutely a hoarder, which means that when you walked in the house, I don't care where you stepped, you'd step on something. I mean, you look at this table, no offense people, but I mean, it would be twice. His kitchen table was twice as messy as this is.
They're all hoarders at that time.
I mean,
Hoarding your deal.
the guy was very successful at one point. I mean, he actually negotiated with, he worked with attorneys to negotiate a Quizno lawsuit that they won. He was very successful, but turned bad. So we looked at it and said, well, geez, not including all these judgments, you got $460,000, of equity sitting there. We went in with our general contractor and figured we had $100,000 to rehab the house. Now that really consisted of a lot. I mean, new roof, all new outside, all new windows, basically taking everything out from the inside and just starting or new. So what did we have to do legally to make certain that we were safe? There is a certain part of this that I'm going to save for a question to see if anybody has a question in regards to the Bankruptcy 13. So the first thing is that I got together through him with his bankruptcy attorney. Since he was in a Bankruptcy 13, how can I take possession of this property? Then I actually was able to have a phone meeting with a Chapter 13 trustee, okay? And it was Mrs. Eamon. Got to talk to her. The reason was that I couldn't be putting myself out at risk and investing this if, one, we did get the deal, we try to sell it, and all of a sudden the Chapter 13 trustee comes in and says, we want it all. Then I wound up and I hired my attorney who referred me to even a specific bankruptcy attorney in Loveland who used to be a Chapter 7 trustee, which spending an hour with him was like going to a Robert Kiyosaki seminar. It was absolutely incredible. So incredible amount of knowledge had to be gained before I felt safe in using private money to help purchase this. Next thing was that I needed to take the property subject to. That was the key thing. I wanted this thing subject to because I don't want any money into it, but I want possession of the property. So the first thing we did is I said, listen, I said, Mike, we need to quick claim this into a land trust because I don't want anything to spark a due on sale clause. We're going to call the land trust his last name residential trust. So he agreed, not a problem. So I created the land trust for him. After we did that, and we quick claimed it, so the documents went in, quick claimed it, got it into a land trust. Then I went back to him and I said, okay, now you're going to assign the beneficiary of that land trust to me. Because that's actually not to me, but to my LLC. Because as a beneficiary in that land trust, you got to have an EIN number when you sell that for tax purposes. So we put the beneficiary in my LLC. And then I said to him, but Mike, I really have to have control on this because I'm really bringing the money to the table with this. I'm really saving your butt. I need to be the trustee. I need you to resign as the trustee of your land trust, and I need to be the trustee of the land trust. Not a problem. Every bit of that is reviewed by our attorneys. It was all notarized, and whatever needed to be recorded was recorded, but if anybody knows about land trust, you don't record land trust. I now have total control of this property. So, structuring the deal was, we needed $100,000 to start off with to pay for his ongoing mortgage for 6 months. It's got to stay current. Now, I didn't want to jump into the cure amount just yet, because there was a cure amount, because in foreclosure, he was behind on his payments. He still had some to have to cure, but I didn't want to pay that cure amount right now. So we needed to pay his mortgage payments. Also, he still needed to pay his Chapter 13 for his unsecured debt. So he gotta have money to still pay out each month for his unsecured debt. Because the last thing that we want to happen is that for this to get back and be dismissed. Okay? We also, of course, we had 6 months of utilities that we have to sit there and pay, and he's having his water shut off. I mean, we went down to the city of Boulder, and I said, here, I'd like to pay this gentleman's water bill. She said, oh, you're so kind. She says, that's just so, I'm not going to tell her that I'm going to make, but, it was very generous, it's like, well, yes, I do this all the time. Anybody else need a water bill paid?
My name is Tony Spandrio.
Here's my crowd of other people that are in a similar predicament.
Well, get so excited here, I'm clicking the wrong button. All right. Now, here he is a hoarder. Of course, he had,
Storage of personal belongings.
so I had to go out and we rented about, 3 large storage units to put this in. No problem.
It was all
I don't
junk.
have a problem with that. Now, we got to get him out, but he has to live somewhere. He has no place to go. He has no income, no nothing, no money. So I said, I'll tell you what, we will find a place for you to stay for 6 months. Now, this is in a contract with him. It's a legal binding contract. Everything that I've said here, that I said that I'm going to do for him, was put into a contract that him and I signed and had notarized and approved by the attorneys. Okay? We had cost of moving, but I also said, well, that's fine, but we're going to have the cost of money to do this deal. I'm getting private money. I'm not paying for the private money. You are, because I'm helping you out. Okay? And then we threw in another $10,000 of just to cover any contingencies of this isn't rehab now, this is just to get him squared away in his house and for me to come in and start working on the house. So the second part of this rehab cost, obviously, is about $100,000 in rehab. So we have about $200,000 into this deal. Okay? So I took a look at this and I said, all right, so what the expenses are going to be. And so we had nothing out of my pocket, no expenses out of my pocket to cover, but we had the funds for the whole project of about $200,000. We're probably going to have the payoff of the mortgage about $290,000. The cost to cure for where he was at was sitting at about $30,000. And then our holding cost for 6 months, which was all the utilities, the insurance, keeping everything else going, including some of the cost of the private funds for points and interest. So about another $15,500. And then the cost to sell based on a $750,000 deal. Now, I'm basically listing the house myself. I'm only going to have to, pay out the 2.8% to the agent that brings in a buyer unless I'm fortunate enough to do my marketing and put out postcards and find my own buyer. And then I just paying a flat fee for a listing to put it on the MLS. And some closing costs are wrapped into that. So we got about $576,500 now into this deal for paying that off. So we have that. Now, what I did and worked to deal with him is I said, well, you're responsible for this private money that we're using to put this together. And when we sell the house, basically these are expenses that you're going to take off of your, bottom line for whatever we sell it for. I mean, I'm willing to help the guy out and give the guy something because this was an incredible deal for me. I have nothing out of my pocket on this deal at all. And so I looked at it and I said, I'll tell you what, I set up a fee structure. It was actually on a scale, did an Excel sheet, and I said, based on us selling the house for this is the percentage I want. And I said, basically, at a $750,000 sale, I want 8%. I want $60,000 cash on this deal. Okay? We looked at that and said, okay, well, we do that. Now we're up to $636,500. We have a sale price of $750,000. Oh my gosh, I'm giving the owner $113,500. Okay? Now I bet a lot of people are going, well, Tony, why aren't you keeping that? I have been generous in what I have done. I mean, I saved a guy 3 days before Christmas and being shoved out of his house because it was going to go to auction. That I saved him, from not doing that. I mean, I'm not out here to save the world and to help everybody, okay? because there's other underlining things beyond this 113.5. Someone that's in a BK13, he does have an exemption that they cannot take away from him. The Chapter 13 trustee, the bankruptcies, they cannot touch $60,000 because he's exempt. Now, if you're over 60 years old, that's $90,000 exemption. So he has a $60,000. So that's $60,000 that he does get to keep and put in his pocket. Okay? But the balance of the balance of the funds to the owner is going to be held by the Chapter 13 as the unsecured debt. So even though the Chapter 13 trustee, they'll go out on a BK13 and they'll negotiate with, just like in a Chapter 7, they'll negotiate with the unsecured debt creditors and say, we're going to give you this much. And so he had they negotiated that $120-some thousand down to $8,000. That's what he was sitting there paying each month on to try to pay that off. But after I talked to the Chapter 13 trustee, she says, hold the phone. How much money is he getting? I'm sorry, but if he's getting that much money, the creditors deserve a little more too. So they said, we're going to take the amount that he has over and beyond that $60,000, and we're going to put that into a trust account, in which then we're going to decide how much he gets and how much all of his creditors get. Okay? So, therefore, the owner's actually paying for the private money. He's covering all of his own expenses for all the rehabs, all of his holding costs. He's paying for that out of the sale of the house. And he has incentives, of course, that if he wants to try to get more, and this is what's interesting because this is what he did. He goes out, and he goes in Boulder, and he finds this guy who's got these old beat up trailers sitting in the back for storage. So instead of me finding these newer storage places to go to, he gets a deal, and he works a deal, and he finds where he can put all this stuff in storage cheaper. That's money in his pocket. He goes to a friend and he says, hey, that RV you got, can I borrow it for about 6 months? I don't have to go find him a place to live because now he's got an RV to stay in. He just saved himself that much more money. It was a great incentive for him to figure out how can I get out of this, but also possibly get a little more in exchange for himself. Okay? So once, again, as we talked about, once he sells and pays off his mortgage, now he can dismiss his BK13, and he can actually go out and he can renegotiate with his creditors if he so desired. It's all in the timing of when he closes and when he decides that he wants to dismiss his bankruptcy 13. Okay? So it was a win-win for the owner, as we talked about. A win-win for me was, one, no money out of pocket. Two, I did everything in a land trust to secure the property, so there's no records of my name of taking it over under my LLC, an entity anywhere that's recorded, because the quitclaim was recorded from his name into his land trust that was in his name. Because then after that we modified everything afterwards. So what the documents that we created minimized anything from a due on sale clause. In fact, I just call up the bank with him there, and we say, we'd like to make 2 months payments, please. Just take it from this account and just move it over here. It's a phone transfer. They don't care where the money's coming from. All of my attorney's costs was built into the cost of the project, which the owners paid. And of course, for me, my profit's based on the percentage of the sale. If things start going, oh, we got a sewer problem to take care of, and it's $10,000. Well, that's $10,000 that's going to come out of the cost of his proceeds to take care of, not me. So, I asked earlier about a specific question on a bankruptcy 13. I'm curious if anyone here knows anything about what I talked about that brings up a question in regards to bankruptcy 13 and selling his property?
My question is, why wouldn't he just have sold?
Because he didn't have the experience, the know-how, and didn't even know what to do to sell his own house. Yes?
What point of the conversation did that I get 8% come in? When did he learn?
Oh, right in the beginning. When I went over and sat down and talked to him, I formulated this whole plan the day I went and talked to him when I met him the very first time, and I said, here's the deal. I mean, I sat down for 3 days solid thinking of this plan to present to him. Okay, has anybody ever heard of the term revested in your property? Okay, well, this is interesting, because here's a little tip, a little snippet of something that's quite interesting in regards to bankruptcy 13. We saw how much equity he had in this, right? Well, his family, his dad and his 4 brothers were attorneys. They said, Mike, I want you to go to your bankruptcy attorney, and you go to the Chapter 13 attorney, and you tell them that you want to be revested in your property. By being revested in a property that has equity, the bankruptcy attorneys will say, Yahoo, baby, we'll let him be revested in this because he can go out and sell it because he's got so much equity, he can take care of his debt. That's the key thing. How many other people out there that we don't know about, and if you go to RENAV, and you look on RENAV, and you see how many homes, you go into all your foreclosures, every county, you look at the foreclosures, and you look to see how many that are in a bankruptcy state. Now 7, we can't do anything with 7. 7, one is that they are, their property is there, and their property has to be sold to pay off their debt, because they choose a 7. But on a 13, so many people may not know that they're in the same situation and they got a fair amount of equity that they can go and be reinvested in their property. That gives them the legal right to sell that property. Remember though, the profit that they make has to go back. It does have to pay any unsecured debts that are out there. I mean, again, thanks to my wife Laura, who happens to know somebody on Facebook that happens to know a guy's son who's in a situation. I mean, these are the ones that are the gems that you think about that, you know, can they ever happen?
Don't find those on MLS.
No, you don't. And so, you know, anyway, so that's the thing that I wanted to find out if anybody had ever heard of, because I never heard of it until I started talking to my attorneys. You know, there's things in there that you have to be careful about because the owner can get squirrely on you if you're not careful, and there is a small risk because he could just decide to say, you know, oh, well, the heck with this, I'm just going to go ahead and go file chapter 7, and then I don't have to pay, you know, I don't have to pay anything, you know. So that, you know, there's some things in there that you have to be careful about. There's a little bit of risk, but I mitigated the risk by getting attorneys involved, and on top of that, is I made certain that I went to Sally Zeman, who is the Chapter 13 bankruptcy trustee in Denver. I said, send me an email telling me that what I'm doing is 100% okay with you, that I can sell his property for him, and that there's going to be a profit at the end, and that everybody knows that he's going to be required to give some of that money back. Questions? Yes?
So, my first question, when you first presented this, is how were the bankruptcy attorneys to work with? I mean, were they
Well, I'll tell you what.
were they open?
The bankruptcy attorney that was his attorney was an attorney in Oliver Frascona's office. And when I went to him and I said, hey, I said, got this deal, I want to put land trust together. She says, what? She says, you can't do that. And I said, oh yes I can. I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to send you a video. This is hilarious. Who is really good on land trust that we all know that's an attorney in Denver?
Bill Bronchak.
Exactly. I sent her the link to Bill Bronchak's video about land trust. It was interesting because the next time I talked to her, she says, oh, okay. Yeah, you can do that, sure.
I do that all along.
Questions?
Ron check comes through.
Yes, sir.
Well, what are the differences in those elections that the owner, the seller, the owner has to make between a 7 and a 13? Meaning, what gain, loss, what
Well, with a
direction?
seven, of course, you know, you are responsible. I mean, your property is tied up in a 7. The bank's going to have to sell it in order for those debts to be paid. You don't have any control in a 7 to pay those debts. Okay, that's basically going to be is once they finally settled, and that part is dismissed, you're gone, and they have control of all that property, the actual, you know, physical property.
Right.
They sell the property and they take care of all the debts. In a 13 is, it's a restructured in which they make a decision on how much you pay each month. And you pay that on an ongoing basis until it's paid in full. It's the same thing with your mortgage. In a 13, you can be paying on your mortgage still, and you're protected from foreclosure.
Right.
Until you finally get that all caught up and you get back on your feet and whatnot. That's what holds so many houses that are in foreclosure, and they sit there in foreclosure for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Because they're in bankruptcy and they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting. But the option that says, oh, he's got equity, which created him being reinvested in his property, changed the whole spectrum of the whole list.
So part of that's the willingness, desire, commitment on the person in that circumstance to fulfill the obligations.
Unless us as investors
That's
can't
right.
find those.
That's
I've
right.
been on RENAC.
That's where I'm going.
I'm telling you, there's if you look at what the equity,
That-
how am I doing on time here? Please stop me.
We're past.
Okay. If you look in RENAV, you can find a lot of them that are sitting at 40%.
So,
She forgot
That
about
has,
that.
that has possible equity in, even though you don't know the rest of the circumstances. Now, there's another site that you go to. It's free, and I'm sorry, it's where you can go to look up all bankruptcy records, and it's a free site. Well, it's free as long as you don't abuse it. Once you start getting more than you're supposed to, they start charging you. But the one thing that I did in this case was that I went to this site. I can't remember the name of the site.
It's not request.
Anyway, huh?
It's not request.
No. And you can go there, and once you get the case number, I had everything, which I knew how much unsecured debt he had. I mean, he had 15 unsecured debt, you know, things in there. And I went through every one of them. Oh, that one says secured on it. So I knew how much he had in secured debt, and I knew how much he had in unsecured debt to know where it would work. Questions? Yes?
How did you go about contacting him and winning his trust?
I'd say that again.
How did you go about initially contacting him? How did you, and win his trust? Get that
Well-
conversation started.
Normally, and what I do is that when I go in, first thing is I let the people know. I says, hey, you know what? I've been in this business for a number of years now.
You called him, you knocked on his door, what did you do?
So first I called him and set up the appointment to go see him.
Okay, yeah.
When I got there, I said, hey, here's my business card. Here's who I am. If you'd like to learn more about me, just go visit. Just go look me up on Google. And you can Google my name. I take up the first 6 pages. You know, I did belong to Robert Kiyosaki. I told him my story, and I'm a Hall of Fame student of Robert's. I have a number of deals. Here's who my law attorney is. Here's who my real estate attorney is. And a lot of times when I'm dealing with individuals for the first time, especially when you're trying to do something that's non-MLS, I believe that you need to be upfront, honest, get everything out there, but you need to impress them with everything that we've learned, all the money that we spend, and let them know what that is. That's how I win this trust.
Thank you.
Yes,
2 questions.
yes.
What was the time, start to finish on the deal?
I went and it was the middle of December when I started working with him, and we finally got everything squared away, and it was right around the 1st of March, I believe it was.
Okay.
The reason I look at David is that Dave and I actually have a little bit of a partnership, with this deal also.
And then how much did I didn't see in your math, how much did the private money get out of the deal? The person that was providing the funding for the people?
Well, the individuals that are providing the funds, 2 and 10. Pardon? 2 and 10. 2 points, 10% interest.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I need to let Dave get up here and do his thing, so.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, everybody.